Welcome to Gratified Grad, where it's my goal to help you graduate with gratification. Today's video, we're going to be doing a presentation discussion on the double bind, the price of being a minority woman in science. My name is Dr. Letitia Franklin, and I'm super excited to share this information with you. So let's get into it. So this is Dr. Shirley M. Malcolm. She was a Penn State graduate, and she went on to do a number of great things. Penn State actually dedicated a building to her, and this is the plaque that has been put on the side of the building. This is a report of the Minority Women Scientists. This report was done in December of 1975, and it was supported by the National Science Foundation. So, what is AAAS and OOS or OOS? As you may know, science is known for its alphabet soup. So before we get deep into this, let's go ahead and spell it out. AAAS stands for the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And OOS stands for the Office of Opportunities in Science. And so this is a subgroup within AAAS, and the purpose of this is to increase the number of minorities and women and handicapped in the natural, social, and applied sciences. It's also to functions to increase the opportunities available and increase the number of women, minority, and handicapped scientists in policy making. So they're trying to take a full, well-rounded approach to diversifying the field. So although we're not going to go into every chapter extensively, I did want you to know that this publication, once again entitled The Double Bind, The Price of Being a Woman Minority in Science, has a total of 6 chapters, and it is readily available online. So, what factors into being a scientist? Well, in the publication, they name a couple of things. The first thing that they talk about is you have to decide between a few extra hours in the lab to gather that data to make that publication to then continue to fund and support your work, or take a few more hours of sleep, or maybe just chillax, take a moment to just watch a movie. And so what they're talking about here is this idea of well-being. As a scientist, you have to think about what your well-being is. The next thing that they talk about is this idea of work-life harmony. As a woman, babies don't wait to be born. We get married, we have families. When children come, you start your family, and that's an entire change to the individual's life. But then there's also the thought of computers that crash at 3 a.m. What happens when all of your data was on this computer? You didn't have any backups. Thank goodness today we have clouds, we have online servers, so we have different places where we can save the data for that. But then there's also things like site visits and conferences where you go to other institutions to present your work, or you go to a conference which typically is 3 to 4 days. This is taking time away from your family. So how do you balance out or harmonize getting the work done and having a life? And then the final thing that I'm going to pull out here that we're going to dive into a little bit more is this understanding of physical disabilities, poverty, or prejudice that people experience, and that understanding that the history of racial discrimination in this country, the United States, does not exclude itself from the scientific community. So how are we appreciating and honoring the intersectionality of people? So, what is intersectionality? Let's take me for example. You can visually see I am a woman. I have more melanin, or I'm also known as black. I'm fit, and I am able-bodied. What you can't see is that I'm a scientist. I come from a low middle class socioeconomic upbringing, a southern upbringing, and I'm heterosexual, just to name a few. These are the things that make up me as a human being. This term was coined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. Now, I want to emphasize something here, that this report was written in 1975. And that means that it was before there was even language or a term to describe what these women here are articulating in this paper. So I highlighted 2 points that really emphasize and show what intersectionality and how it plays a role in science. And so they have said that they meaning women or minorities, have been traditionally excluded because of biases that are related to both their race or ethnicity and gender. This is why the paper is called the double bind. And minority women fall between both the cracks. So there's a crack where women can fall through, a crack where Black people can fall through, or minoritized people can fall through. And what they're showing here is that one crack in each of those groups is exacerbated, or it's a greater problem because it's affecting Black women and causing a larger crack. And so they also discuss about the viewpoint of minoritized women in the women's movement. And so most of the people in the conference won't describe themselves as feminists, even though the work that they're doing is to make science more equitable for people who look like them. And that is because the way that the women's movement was labeled, it did not include that of Black or minoritized women. And so I've highlighted here, essentially, there were concerns in the women's movement that did not totally match minoritized women. And so to go a little bit further into what definition feminists were given, it was typically speaking to middle and upper class white women, and they have different concerns and issues when you think about the minoritized woman. And so here I took the snapshot out of the publication. It is the U.S. Doctoral Scientists and Engineers by Field in 1973. Because I am a life scientist, I decided to focus in on the life sciences. And although we're not going to go through every number here, I just want to highlight that the total life sciences in both sexes is 64,000. The total minority of that 64,000 is 3,000. And when you look at the numbers, it's 56,000 men out of the total number, so we're not even looking at race, and it's 7,000 women. Now when we look at the race, we look at the Black or African American, it's 74 women compared to 505 men, whereas in the white population, it's 6,000 women compared to 49,000 men. If you look at the and so those are some alarming numbers. I did not look into what the numbers are today, but hopefully there's not as much of a disparity or gap between the two. Let's talk a little bit about critical mass and why it's important. This term was coined by Morton Grodzins in the 1960s. It's a term that's used to describe how much is needed for there to be a shift or a change to occur. So for example, this idea was actually thought of back, it was coined when thinking about white flight in Chicago neighborhoods. So, how many black people needed, or black families needed to move into a white neighborhood before there started to be this shift outward? And so the number of black families became the critical mass before the white people felt uncomfortable or felt like they needed to leave that neighborhood and move elsewhere. So, in the case of thinking about this scientifically, they also talk about this in the publication, saying that the critical mass of minority women scientists and engineers that is sufficiently large to provide individual roles for younger women is just simply not enough. It's not great enough. We need more women and more minority women in science and engineering positions so that more younger women will see themselves and where they have the opportunities to go in the future. Another book that talks about this is Whistling Vivaldi, and that is How Stereotypes Affect Us and What We Can Do. That is by Claude and Steele. So when we think about the whole point of this was to provide recommendations for employers. And so one of the recommendations that they suggest is that having company policies, promotion practices, and evaluation procedures prior to job interviews. So a lot of times they think decisions are made based off of assumptions and feelings, but nothing is formally written down. So how do you put into policies the expectations, the things that interviewers should be looking for in their employees to make it a less biased selection process? Another thing to make note of as employers is recognizing the time and the energy spent by minority women. There's this thing that we call the black tax, where people of color tend to spend more time answering emails, more time helping students, more time away from their research, the thing that contributes to whether or not they get tenure and promotion and things like that. And then also along that same idea is having evaluations of their non-science related function. So not just looking at what science are they producing, but looking at them holistically and understanding what are they doing, how are they spending their time, and is it all effectively done? And then finally, thinking about the financial support that's provided for child care. That is another way to support women, minority women, is knowing that families, they have children, and providing child care takes a bit of the responsibility off and a bit of the pressure and the stress. And then they also just have very vague, and I would call these the bare minimum recommendations of meeting them where they are. So recognizing that every individual is in a different space and allowing the person to identify what their unique needs are. And then as the employer, you figure out how can you fulfill those immediate needs to then build them to wherever you want them to go. Now, affirmative action at this point is a very questionable topic in terms of where we are here in the United States. But in 1975, it was suggested that affirmative action must be applied to education and training, not just recruitment, hiring, and promotion. So how do we equally educate and give the experiences to those who are already in the positions so that they can then be retained and be promoted throughout the process? And then finally, and this kind of goes back up to that first point, is that there is no one person's perspective. So don't try to say that we're going to do this one thing and expect every individual to be able to benefit from that one thing. We are all unique beings and should be treated as such. So, how to use this information. If you are a minoritized woman, ask for it. Just ask for it. If there is something that you need, something that can support you, you are your best advocate. You have to ask for it, because 9 times out of 10, the other person will not know what your needs are. And so it's not that they don't particularly want to help you, they just don't have any idea how to help you. So you have to be that advocate for yourself. And then share those resources, share your experience, share the fact that you asked for it and you were able to receive whatever help you received. And then for anyone else, please, please, please contribute informed critiques of, suggestions of, and changes to policies. Policies are the things that have the most impact and are the least looked at and changed. So starting with the policies can help correct a lot of the injustices that we are experiencing. And then listen to the experiences of minoritized women for perspective. This is building and developing cultural humility, your understanding of people, cultures, and situations that you may never experience. And so having that cultural humility allows for you to be a more supportive individual. I thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and I hope it was helpful. Have a great day.